I'm Lourdes Lopez. I'm the Executive Director of Morphosis, the Wheeldon Company. I started dancing when I was 5.5 because I had some orthopedic issues. I was pigeon-toed and flat-footed and didn't have calf muscles, and that was in Miami. And by the age of 8, orthopedic shoes came off, and I remember my parents saying, well, we can't really afford these classes, do you want to keep going? I said yes. So they put me with a Russian teacher named Alexander Nigodov, who actually taught me that these steps had names to them, and these ballets existed: forward, 3 acts, Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, and all of a sudden taught me the history of dance, and I think it caught on. I got the bug. At the age of 10, I went to New York, and I was given a scholarship with Joffrey, and I studied there for that summer. And then the following summer, got a scholarship with the School of American Ballet, and would go to New York every summer until the age of 14 when they asked me to stay. I then moved to New York at 14 with my sister, who was 19, and we lived by ourselves. And I studied at School of American Ballet for about 1.5 years, and at 15.5 got into the company as an apprentice, and then at 16 as a full-fledged company member with New York City Ballet. And here I am. My orthopedic issues, I don't really remember them, whether they were an obstacle. You know, at 5, you're not focused on that. It didn't mean, all I knew is I was wearing orthopedic shoes, but I never thought that I would be a professional dancer. I was never thinking, oh, because I have this, I won't ever dance. In fact, I don't think I ever understood that I could actually make a career out of dance until I was about 14. I grew up in Miami, Florida, and we would watch these dancers come in once a year, I think, or twice a year, as international ballet artists, and they would do, sort of like a mixed program of pas de deux. But I never quite understood that there were specific companies and that you could actually get paid, and you had benefits, and there was a theater, and that just didn't enter my mind until much later. I really think that my generation was incredibly lucky because we worked with George Balanchine and Jerome Robbins, and really at that point they were the 2 geniuses of 20th century classical dance. I mean, there were other geniuses like Martha Graham and Merce Cunningham, but in terms of the classical vocabulary, those were the 2 that were really the most. And my career spanned 24 years with New York City Ballet, so I was able to work with both and be created by both those choreographers. And it was interesting because they were very, very different individuals. They basically got the same result from a dancer, but in very, very different ways. Jerome Robbins was a taskmaster and not always very nice, and not that he was brutal, but there was a tension in rehearsals and in these dress rehearsals, and he did it all because he just wanted, when that curtain came up, for you to be as the best that you could possibly be. And he was exact. You needed to move like he said, and an arm had to be exactly how he wanted it, and the step had to be exactly on the timing that he wanted it. And Balanchine, Mr. B, was just the complete opposite. He was just incredibly respectful and nice, and if you couldn't do the step, he'd happily change it for you. And he really wanted the artist to come out, so he gave you a foundation or guidelines, which were the choreography and the steps, and then he just wanted to see what you did with it. I mean, that's what was exciting to him. Balanchine and Robbins are called the geniuses of 20th century ballet, but the foundation is the classical vocabulary. In other words, they use the classical training, they use the Pointe shoe, but they clearly were pushing it into the 21st century. Rather, they took 19th century dance and made it into 20th century. And now what needs to happen is that 20th century dance, which is Robbins and Balanchine, and who else? Elliott Feld and Twyla Tharp and Bill Forsyth someone has to now move dance into the 21st century, still using the classical foundation, which is just the classical training. And I think I'm basically talking about the Pointe shoe and the ability to turn out and the line, the aspects of a line when a dancer is on stage. And that's what I mean by classical. The progression, I think, has I call it flatlined a little bit, because there was so much innovation going on in the 1940s and actually the 1950s and 60s in terms of dance, whether it was modern or classical. And we've reached a point, I think I've seen it, where it's kind of status quo, where the dance world, the ballet companies, the classical ballet companies are kind of working in a bubble by themselves in a theater. Then the modern dance companies are working in another bubble. And there's no interaction of ideas or energy or support or collaboration. It's become very separated and segregated, basically. So, you know, how do you change that? Well, if you're a ballet company, you look outside of your world and you get a visual artist who is a contemporary visual artist, or you get a designer who designs costumes for theater, or you just kind of, it's like, it's sort of like the melting pot theory. You know, the more different aspects that you add to it, the more exciting the product, the stronger the product is. That's going to come out of it. And I just think also for artists, the minute you're in a bubble, I think you're dead. Because that's how you get your inspiration, from watching other people, from information from other people. I mean, it's all about information. It's interesting because I think New York City Ballet was, because it was run or headed by a genius, even though it was all his choreography, and I don't think I'm biased when I say this, no two Balanchine ballets are alike. You can't compare Agon to Serenade, and you can't compare Serenade to Apollo. And so with him as the main choreographer somehow feeding these dancers and feeding, we didn't lack for creativity. And you know, Balanchine came from an era that in terms of the Ballet Russe, that he really did work with Picasso and you know, Chagall and Stravinsky and Prokofiev. So he understood that, and you know, what was interesting about Balanchine is that a lot of the music that he chose was music that was never choreographed, it wasn't Chopin and it wasn't Delibes, and I mean, though he has some of those ballets to those composers, but you know, it's Hindemith and Webern and Stravinsky, and you know, he really looked outside the norm, and I think that's another kind of creative collaboration. With Robbins, what he brought to New York City Ballet is the fact that he was on Broadway. And so he had a whole nother idea and scope of how to move and of American dance, and I mean, you know, try to bring in Bernstein and Copeland and choreograph to that music. So those years, there wasn't that much outside collaboration. You know, we didn't have visual artists coming in and designers, but the choreographers themselves were innovative and looking outside their world. I think technology is going to be a huge aspect outside for dance. I think number one, you're going to be seeing video and film used a lot more during performances of dance, though one has to be careful because the two of them can really visually compete in terms of the audience and where the focus is. But I think it's moving into a direction where people want to experiment, and I think that's important. Whether it's right or wrong, the idea is just to take the chance and do it. I think in terms of video, my personal belief is that dance is an art form that's handed down, and while I can download a dance, you know, from YouTube and learn it in a studio, there is nothing like having the actual person in front of you, because you have to realize it's, you know, the art form is having people watch you. A musician can kind of tape something or record something and then listen to it and see where he's made the mistakes. A dancer can't quite do that. So I think in terms of teaching, it's not going to help that much, but I think in terms of the actual performances on the stage, I think it'll be a very exciting addition to dance, video and film.